Joel Embiid continues to state his case for MVP, this time with a dominant performance against Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz. I'm Robin Lundberg here with Ben Pickman and Wilton Jackson. And guys, the MVP debate seems like it's daily this year. And I think that's because there are so many worthy candidates. If I'm boiling it down to my top four, it's Embiid, Jokic, LeBron, and Harden. And that's with all due respect to Damian Lillard and Steph Curry, who don't even crack my top four. And if I'm giving out my vote right now, big men, I tend not to favor them. I tend to favor shot creators. And I've said before, LeBron James is my default pick. That still may be the case at the end of the season. But I've also said James Harden has been the best player in the NBA since he got to Brooklyn. That's now long enough where I think at this very moment he'd be my most valuable player. But what do you think, Wilton? Is it Embiid?
You know what, Robin? Before last night, I didn't have Embiid in my top five players. Actually in my top three players to win the MVP. But, after his dominant performance last night, you're talking about 40 points, 19 rebounds against a team that leads the league in defensive rating in the Jazz. So Embiid did everything you wanted him to do last night. He scored at will. He grabbed the most rebounds individually last night in a game against a team that leads the league in both offensive and defensive rebounding rating. And then also when you look at him, you have to beat the best teams on any given night. The Sixers lost to a Jazz team on February 15th, but Embiid did not play. So to come back and have a 40-point performance last night, and then, considering what, Steph is doing, Luka, Jokic, and LeBron, night in and night out, to see him do that, plus, nail a game-winning three-pointer to help his team win that game, I mean, it screams MVP to me.
Well, I think you're putting a little too much stock in that one game if he wasn't your MVP. But perhaps I'm taking a little bit away, from the big guys, because he did have a huge shot in that game where he dribbled out of the post to hit a three. We've seen Jokic create in ways we haven't seen bigs do before. I'm still, leaning with the Jameses as LeBron and Harden, my pick at the moment. Ben, who you got?
I think I would lean Joel Embiid, but I think you'd have to do it for the totality of his first half, right? I remember at the beginning of this season, our own Michael Shapiro actually picked Joel Embiid to win the MVP, and he got chewed out on social media. I remember some of those comments on Instagram. Joel Embiid at that time had plus 2,500, plus 3,000 odds to win the MVP. That's all the way down to plus 225 this morning in the DraftKings Sportsbook, a little homage there to the fantasy executive. But it's Embiid and Jokic who have really seen their odds decrease throughout the season and become favorites or near favorites for this award. You look at it, right? Jokic and Embiid, they're 1-2 in PER. LeBron James is 16th. In overall Raptor, which is 538's kind of advanced player statistic, it's Embiid, then Jokic, then LeBron. NBA.com, their player impact estimate, Embiid, Jokic, then LeBron. So these guys are all kind of jostling back and forth. And so for that reason, I think you then have to turn to record, right? And record is another important consideration, I think, for some voters. The Sixers are the #1 team in the Eastern Conference. I don't think you want to put everything on record. That's why, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, they're not in this conversation in the same way that some of these other guys are. But if you're looking at really small differences, I think you have to reward Embiid because the Sixers are better than the Nuggets. The Sixers are better than the Lakers at this point. They're the best team in their conference. They've been the best team all year. I think you have to lead Joel Embiid right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Joker or LeBron James took this award home come season's end.
Well, yeah, the Nets are right behind them. We're a little bit caught up in a Lakers funk, which isn't even that bad. So LeBron was such a heavy favorite. I don't know why we're putting him all the way to the back, after a couple of weeks. You brought some good numbers, though, there are other things that come into consideration, like a record, you said. And I like you defending Michael Shapiro because he did get a lot of heat for that. But I think if you said LeBron, if you said Harden, if you said Embiid, if you said Jokic, even if you wanted to make the case for Lillard and Steph, I'd hear it out because the MVP crowd is probably more crowded than it's ever been.